Good afternoon in Somerset West, Tanja Beutler. Really good to see you. We're gonna, as I've already mentioned to you, we're doing a little video broadcast around the wines in the region to our wine club, which is called the Painted Dog, here in the United States. Really, what we're trying to do is just get a sense of your wines, the regions you produce your wines in, of course, who you are. We'll start off with that a little bit. And then we can just have an open conversation around what the production of how you produce your wines and the quality of them. But let's start off with point one, and maybe if you can just give a little introduction of yourself, Tanja, who you are, a little bit of your background, your history, and then we can go from there into talking about the region and the wines itself. So over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Warren, and thanks so much for allowing us the space to actually talk about our wines. Always excited to speak about South African wines, I have to say. So I've been in the industry for 3 decades already, in South African wine. So, my journey started that I actually studied psychology, so at Stellenbosch University, which had absolutely nothing to do with wine. And then followed a friend of mine over to the States. So, and because he was a Springbok triathlete, he spent his weekends on the bicycle, and I found friends to go into Napa and Sonoma with, and fell in love with wine in the US wine industry, actually. So when I got back to South Africa, I really wanted to work in wine. And I was very blessed to have my first job at the Lima Mountain Vineyards in 95, 96, round about there. Wow. And worked right at the bottom, cellar door sales, and then from there moved on to Rustenburg Wines, did repping for them. So a lot of people are familiar with the Brampton label. I was part of launching that into the South African market. And then finally after that started my own business called Topaz Wines, which was a small garagiste wine producer from home. So we literally had 100 vines in our backyard, and we'd literally make wines at home under the carport. We didn't even have a garage. So, we started off making Pinot Noir like that. And we were one of the first to bring the concept of the garagiste movement into South Africa, which was very popular in the States. People like Screaming Eagle were an example of that. So we started the garagiste movement of South Africa. I headed that up with Clive Tall, my partner at the time. And we developed a brand called Topaz Wines. And that was an awesome time. The media internationally and locally just wanted to have a new story, and it was fun and it was exciting and it was awesome. And so did that. And then eventually moved on from there, doing a lot of consulting for smaller wineries who needed help with wine admin and the red tape that people can't stand, especially when you're an artist as a winemaker and you don't want to deal with all of that.
Yep.
And then there was a time where I was consulting for a wine farm out in Elgin. And my current business partner, Flagan, came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about starting a warehouse?" So I said, "Absolutely, but it's got to be bonded." And he said, "What's bonded?" So he phoned me that night and said, "Hey, listen, you need to be part of it because I don't understand all the red tape." But he came from the logistics side, and so we created Cape Town Wine Hub, which is my business today.
Amazing. And I actually should have said this up front to those watching, is that we actually do business through that corporation. So Sondella Cellars and the Cape Town Wine Hub are good friends in the sense that you helped me a lot with introducing me to some of the wine estates and wine farms around the region about a year ago, and then you are my person on the ground in Somerset West, which is, for those that don't know, is just outside the Stellenbosch region, on the ocean, and you helped me with collating that variety and those beautiful wines from all those farms, and help me get it to the United States and ultimately to the folks watching this video, because the wines will have passed through your hands theoretically before they get it in their cellars back here in the USA. So yeah, we've got a great history and good working relationship.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
Thanks, Tanja.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit. I mean, I think the interesting thing about your wine specifically, and you know, you're very small batch. You're very sort of focused on the wines you produce. You've made a selection on the region within the Western Cape or within the winelands that you want to focus your wines, or at least where you get your grapes from and where you get your wines from, where you produce. I understand it's from in the general Paarl region, which is part of the winelands. We don't actually have a lot of Paarl-based wines in our portfolio at the moment, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that region, why it's special, and why you chose to make your wines out of there.
Okay, so just because I stopped at Cape Town Wine Hub, which does very much logistics.
Yes, sorry.
I just mostly want to go into the fact that, why I started the hub labels is basically because, you know, having produced my own wines for so many years, I missed that. I hadn't done an own label in, I think, 7 or 8 years, which is quite a long break. So, and very selfishly, I decided to make wines that I love to drink. And so I focused on the Rhone varietals. And in the past, under the Topaz label, we focused a lot on cooler climates, which was more the Elgin region where we sourced our grapes from. I think basically because we started off with Pinot Noir as a varietal, the first variety we made, and it just needed a cooler climate. But I found a lot of interest in what we refer to as Voor Perdeberg, which is near Paarl, which is probably about half an hour's drive out of Stellenbosch towards Wellington. And you mentioned Chris O'Shea from Dumas Fontaine. He's in Wellington area, so where I source my grapes are sort of halfway between him and Stellenbosch. So interesting terroir there, also very close to the Swartland region, which is interest. And that area, the Voor Perdeberg, is very much, for me, interesting. I find it's a warmer climate, generally speaking, but it has pockets of coolness also coming through, because I see that coming through in the end products, the end wine. The Philadelphia, Durbanville area also, which is closer to Cape Town, often is referred to as slightly cooler. And I think they get a little bit of that Atlantic sea breeze coming through depending on the weather. So for me, very interesting area. I've found my heart there, I think, in many ways. Because I haven't in the past dealt with that area at all. I always thought, oh, Paarl's hot climate completely and, you know, over-extracted fruit. But I found these wines to be absolutely awesome, beautifully balanced. But then I work very closely with Chris Williams. He's got his own label called the Foundry, and he makes the base wines with me. And we spend a lot of time then blending together. So, and I've known him for many years because he was part of the Garagiste movement when I first started that. So we've come a long road. And I really admire the wines that he does. For those of you who don't know Chris, he used to be the winemaker at Meerlust before he started his own label. And the Foundry, so Chris makes very much the individual varietals. So you'll do Shiraz on its own, Grenache Blanc on its own, Roussanne, Verdelho. And I come along and I want those pockets that he's got there to blend together. So that's how we work quite in synergy with each other.
And so you've got Chris and yourself, and is there, I think, did you mention there was another winemaker involved, or was it just the two of you guys? Just the two of you guys?
Chris makes the wine, and then I sit and blend.
Okay. You sit there and you taste the wines, you say to Chris,
and I go, this is what I'm looking for, because I know in my heart and soul how it should work on the palate. So I've done a lot of blending in my life. So yeah, we work closely together on that perspective.
Nice. And then you've recently, I think the hub, which is the two Rhone blends that you produce in that fashion you just described. You focused in on Rhone Blend specifically. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about why Rhone Blend, or at least the Rhone style of wine coming out of that region, and why your preference is going that way?
Yes. So Rhone styles for me, look, when we did Topaz, we did Pinot Noir because Clive did his Cape Wine Masters thesis, my business partner and life partner at the time, on Pinot Noir. So he did a bit of time in Oregon, etc. And so that's why he planted Pinot Noir. But my big love was always Shiraz. And we also saw Shiraz from a cool climate area in Elgin.
Right.
And I just loved the character that was coming through there, sort of much more austere, much more interesting, like for me, than a fully hot climate Shiraz. So I kind of fell in love with the variety there.
Okay.
And for me, I also love the fact that with Rhone, we've done Bordeaux blends for years and years and years in South Africa. And I think our climate, generally speaking, is much warmer and lends itself well to the Rhone varieties, wherever it might be terroir-wise. Generally speaking, the climate is warmer. So, and I think just interesting varieties that you get in Rhone that just, when you start blending them, really produce something amazing and just lekker to drink, as we say in South Africa.
Amazing.
And I also try and always look at food and wine, and I think it's so important to produce wines that go well with food. Like you can get your aperitif wines, often a Sauvignon Blanc that's light, delicious, zesty as an aperitif, also good food wine. But I really like something that really stands up to a good meal, and it's a great combo, and it evolves in the glass as you're having a meal. I think that whole tradition is something that's important when I start developing wines.
Yeah. Can we get a slightly technical? So that's great, and I understand the profile of what you're describing there. But can you be a little technical? I think the Rhone style is somewhat is not as well known as say, for example, a Bordeaux blend or even a single varietal. Can you give us a little bit of a description on what Rhone style is and how that's produced?
Okay, so when we talk about Rhone style, we refer to a region in France. So like you get Bordeaux, like you get Burgundy. Rhone would be that area where those varieties are grown. And often when we look at those varieties in white, you're looking at things like very odd varieties. That's why I'll show you now how my label looks, and that's why I don't really say too much about it. But it can be varieties like Verdelho, Mousson, Grenache Blanc, Viognier. Those are very much your Rhone style varieties in white. And then in red, you get your Shiraz, obviously, Mourvèdre, Grenache Noir. And those are, sometimes even it was interesting actually with Topaz. We actually had a moment where we made Viognier and we made Shiraz and we made Pinot Noir. And there was a moment where we had just pressed the. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I just wanted to change my light. Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, no problem. So we had a moment where the Viognier, we just finished pressing. So we had the skins and we just got in the Shiraz and we added those skins to the Shiraz and it was phenomenal, So then there was, Viognier actually came into South Africa to blend a small percentage with Shiraz and it's found its own feet. So obviously the reds are far more well known than the whites, but generally speaking, for me, it's just interesting. It's just fascinating in a different way to, maybe I'm sticking my neck out a little bit, But and I think there's scope for these varieties for sure.
Yeah, it's great to be. I mean, I'm a big fan of sticking your neck out. I mean, it's like if you're able to break away from the plethora of the other, like all the Bordeaux blends across the region and all the single varietals. If you can be more distinct, by doing something different, that's great.
Well, I always think, I think Chris sticks his neck out the most because he does the single varietals of all these crazy varietals.
Yeah. Relatively new though, right, from the region, Rhone, compared to the Rhone Style. It's a. I mean, I've just, from my personal experience, I left the SA about 16, 17 years ago, and I never thought of that part of the world as producing Rhone Style wines. So I don't know exactly what the timeline is there, but I'm assuming it's within the past 10 or so years that Rhone Style has been coming out of that region.
Yeah,
that sounds all right.
So as I said earlier, it's very close to the Swartland region. And there's a lot of producers producing good Rhone Style blends there, also in white, which is interesting enough. So a little bit of experimentation, new aginess, happening, new ideas happening. But it's just a little bit of a warmer climate, I think. I wouldn't do a Rhone Style necessarily from Elgin because it's a little bit too cold. But the reds have gained momentum, I think, Warren, since you left. Sooner than the whites. But I think there's huge scope for the whites because the climate just lends itself to it. It's as simple as that.
Amazing. And then just a slight sort of veer off the left on the climate side of things. Have we seen much change in climate change over the past 10, 15 years that is kind of making things more suitable for these kind of wines, or is it just a new region and a new sort of terroir that we found that we like?
No, I think definitely. I mean, if you look at, I'm talking now from the red tape side of the wine industry that I deal with. It was about 15 years ago or so that they introduced the Cape South Coast as a region, which is up from basically from past Elgin to Plettenberg Bay, all along the coast. And that area used to get summer rains and could never make wine. It was impossible. Where now they're maybe doing the earlier ripening varietals that you would use for bubbly or whatever. But there's a wine route there now, so
I remember that when I was there. I don't remember driving from Hermanus up the Plet. I don't remember seeing vineyards when I was there.
No, there are. So there's definitely that, but it's a slow burn, so you don't actually notice it as much as if you had to really think back and go, wow, no, there is, for sure. You can see the slow burn happening. Yeah, so it could be very much so, but I think Paarl area's always had a little bit of a warmer climate, but yet there's that cold breeze coming in off the seaside from the Atlantic as well. So it's just a fascinating area, that Voor Perdeberg, for me.
Amazing. Let's talk about the wines, shall we? So you've got you've got two bottles of wine, really, two labels under the hub, which is your brand. You've got a white Rhone Style and you've got a red Rhone Style. We talked a little bit about where they were coming from, but do you want to dive a little bit deeper into the wines themselves? Maybe we can start with the white and talk about what you've got in the bottle, and then we can move over to the red.
Okay, so both my wines, because I've been there for so long, I decided, here we go again. I don't know how many labels I've bought out in my life already, but I wanted to keep it straight and simple, without too much fuss. Although I wanted it to be classic and I wanted it to feel special for the person opening or buying the wines and opening the bottle. So both come in, so this is the white, both come in tissue paper. I'll open the other one now. So there we go.
Yeah.
Very plain label.
Mm.
I'm going to open the red while we.
Very clean, yeah. It's you were saying up front that the because of the style of wine you're making, you're not over describing it on the bottle necessarily, because you want people to have a bit of experience.
Yeah, so there's the red.
Beautiful.
So both wines are very much. I designed the label like that firstly because I didn't want to complicate things with varieties that people don't yet understand or know about. And I also wanted to give myself the space when I'm blending to use any of those varietals that are Rhone without having to be stuck in a box. In other words, from one year to the next, it might change completely. This year, the white was, just so you know, it's a 22 vintage, the white.
Okay.
And as we blended it, it landed up being, it was so crazy. I was blending with Chris and we had various options to blend with. And it landed up completely on mouthfeel and palate weight and balance that I wanted. It landed up being 88% Verdelho, 6% Mouston, and then 6% Grenache Blanc. So basically, it would be on the label as a Verdelho.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So you choose. So let me rephrase that. So you depending on the vintage and the year and the season, you will then do your selection across the different Rhone varietals, and then your blend will shift depending on what the quality of that vintage is in that particular year.
Yeah,
it's very different than if you just say, listen, I'm an 85% Cabernet. Water blend. So okay, so you very much playing with the season and with the vintage and what's the quality of the grapes.
Exactly. So for example, when I'm blending the next one tomorrow, actually, I know that we're going to look quite heavily at Roussanne, for example. So which I haven't got in this one at all. So just depending what comes out the woodwork and how again it feels on palate weight and balance, it could be a completely different makeup, but still a white Rhone varietal blend.
So how does it and I know you're going to go into blend a new, as you say, a new vintage tomorrow, but tell us a little bit about the taste profile, if you like, on the current vintage that we've got and what you're trying to go after, and then maybe we can talk a bit about how that pairs as well.
Yeah, so it's an interesting, with the whites, it's quite interesting that the residual sugar is slightly, and I don't want to get too technical because I get bored with that myself. So, so with the residual sugar, which is the fruitiness, the sweetness in a wine, which you always pick up at the tip of your tongue. So most people miss how fruity or sweet a wine actually is when they're tasting, because you normally hit the mid palate and swallow. But with this one, we up the residual sugar a little bit, and I found that the consumer actually likes that. It's not a semi-sweet, it's still a dry wine, and it's not an off-dry, it's still dry. But just that little hike in sweetness is very appealing to the consumer. We've obviously got enough acidity in place to hold that in place, which I also think is very important. Because what happens with Rhone varietals, and I know that I've worked closely with Viognier as a white wine varietal. If you don't watch what happens in the vineyard, it can very quickly ripen, literally within 24 hours. You have to watch that vineyard on if it gets hot. And then obviously you're sitting with high alcohols, and then the wine becomes very flabby. So it's important to just get that balance and get the right optimal picking sugar. And and just to have that acidity in place, not to make it all flabby. So, but the flavors are delicious. I love a Rhone Style. It's just so different and so unique and such a food wine. Like I remember going to seafood restaurants, and you'll know it, Panama Jack's at the waterfront.
Amazing place, yes.
Yeah.
Great.
and great prawns. And I went in there and I said to Gavin, you know, I just want a bottle of my Viognier and I want to have that with prawns. And he said, well, that's going to cost you 300 Rand. And that was 7 years ago. And I went, well, I'm going to swap it out. Is that okay? But those kind of combinations where you just know it's a match made in heaven is just worth it, you know, but it's also so awesome to drink on its own. Yeah. So, and then the red. So the red is the blend of mainly Shiraz and then Grenache Noir. So it's a 60-40 split. And that worked really, really well with that wine. Interestingly enough, when I look at Shiraz, I always want a little bit of white pepper there, because we always go, white pepper is what you get from the cooler climate, black pepper from the warmer climate.
Okay.
And I always look for a little bit of white pepper. I fell in love with a producer in the Rhone called, not me with him, but me with his wine. Although I have met him, called Alan Grayo, and he makes a fantastic Rhone Style blend with like that beautiful, gentle white pepper coming through. I think I'd recognize that wine in any blind tasting. Like I could see the label in front of me. It was such a inspiring wine. And that's also what I look for. You know, I look for that elegance, a little bit of subtlety, but layered fruit. So that's very much both my wines, I think, is what I'm looking for there.
And the way you describe them, from at least from a pairing perspective, they sound very versatile. You were saying like it could go really, like the whites go really well with the prawns, or you know, even when you were describing the reds earlier, you could eat it you could drink it over in any kind of food, really.
Look, I don't, you know, I always say we don't have to restrict ourselves too much on all those rules and regulations. I remember years back, I did a gourmet evening with Peter Goof Wood. Yeah. In Franschhoek, and we decided, yes, everyone's doing these gourmet evenings. We're going to do something completely different, and we went right against the norm. So we did white with red meat and vice versa, and started with port and ended with bubbly. And it was such a festive occasion because nobody knew what to expect next. So,
I love that. I mean, I really do love that. I mean, I think we get so caught up in it. I live in a town in Charleston, South Carolina, where food and wine is so you know, it's a big destination city for food and wine, and people get so caught up in the pairings. I mean, I supply wines to some of the white restaurants here where it's very distinct. It's like we're putting a Cabernet Sauvignon with this particular type of meal, or we're doing a Rhone with this particular type of meal, or we're doing a Shannon with this particular type of meal, and they're almost militant about it. I love what you're saying. I can hear a couple of the comments you're making, Tanya, where it's like you're a bit of a scientist, you're a bit of an experimenter. In a sense, you want to.
If you don't try, you don't know. So you know, I think it's so important to just find, when you do food and wine pairing, you're looking for balance, you know, between food and wine, that they don't contradict, that they rather complement each other, and you know, any combination is possible as long as that balance is there. And what I also find, which is always a difficult a thing to match when it comes to food and wine pairing, is spicier foods. So your curries and all of that is often difficult because we don't have wines that necessarily stand up to that. So with this white, definitely, because of the way it's made, and with that slight fruitiness to it, it stands up to those as well. So your Indian curry, or even your more Thai curries, all of that would be awesome with this wine. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. I mean, I've tasted both of them. They are by Paarl of Wine over here. Fantastic wines. I've drank them with my wife. With the reds with seafood and the whites with some of the sort of more kind of stuff. Really are versatile wines. Yeah. Really enjoy them. I started off the conversation just by saying you're small batch. You kind of really focused in on low volume. which we like because that means we can get access to stuff that other people can't get access
Yeah,
to.
definitely.
Which
I think you're the only guys in the world who have this wine at the moment.
Amazing. Well,
there you go.
Well, we hope to buy more and more. I think the fact that a lot of what happens with the Painted Dog, the club that I've formed, and I'm working with a few folks to bring across wines, that we like to have bottles on our tables that very few people can get hold of. I think the hub and what you're doing there is exactly that profile. We're kind of really looking for almost bragging rights, if you like, around some really high quality wines out of the region that your neighbor can't get hold of, and the neighbor wants it, but they can't get it. So we look forward to putting in some more wine orders in with you over the next 2 weeks. I think my window of ordering closes in about 2 weeks' time.
Very good. I have to say on that note, just so you know what our production is.
Yes.
So we only made 1,500 bottles of each of these wines. So the red is a 21 and the white is a 22.
Okay.
And only 1,500 were produced of each. So yeah, and just also on the white and the red, I know that we spoke earlier about awards and whatever.
Yes, that'll be good to know.
Yeah, so we've obviously submitted them for a few awards because it's a new brand and it's not that well known. So the big what I feel out of the 3 or 4 that we've got that has any international kudos would probably be Tim Atkin. Tim Atkin's a UK Master of Wine. He writes reports on various countries. So he actually goes to see those countries and tastes through the wines of that country. Often also does a discovery tasting of new producers, etc. So he also works on the 100-point scoring system, and the white in his report got a 92 and the red a 89. So I'm actually quite chuffed with those two. And the white also in a local competition won a trophy for best unusual white blend. So funny enough, my ex-partner sat on that tasting panel on Topaz, and he didn't know it was mine until he pulled it out, and it was blind tasting.
Amazing.
Anyway, so I won the trophy for that, which completely floored me because I haven't been doing this side of the wine industry for a long time and felt a little bit insecure. But so I was absolutely floored and very proud and greatly chuffed.
Congratulations. I mean, it's as you say, it's a journey of experimentation, and when you get that approval and that's
and people don't always realize what's involved in putting everything together. It took me probably 6 months on deciding the paper, the label, the tissue paper, the bottle, the waxing, the final box that it comes in, all of that sort of thing. So it all takes time, but I mean I love it. There's no better feeling than having your own 2 babies, as I say.
And they are beautiful wines, and it's beautifully. I think what I like about it, you couldn't quite see it on screen. I'll share the labels and the pictures of the bottles with the rest. Of the team.
It's a little bit difficult to see, but there's a foiling there, and that's all there is. And then I get people saying to me, like me, who has to wear glasses to see anything, they go, "Is there anything on this label?" And I go, "No." And then
try to rub it to see if there's anything coming through, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful white, it's just very clean. I've got it here as well. And it's it really stands off a shelf if it's on a shelf. And it's what I like about the way that you've designed the packaging. It doesn't feel too pretentious. It's
I didn't want that.
Yeah, you compare it to some of my other ones down here, which I won't bring up now, but you almost have to study the label, and you have to it gets a little overwhelming, whereas this is very clean. It's beautiful, and what's inside the bottle is really just brings it home, not necessarily.
Look, I actually just wanted the wine to do the talking. Really, that was really what I wanted. That what you're buying because it says the hub, and that's all you need to know. And the rest is, wine can be so intimidating and so pretentious in so many ways. And in the end, it's a beverage to be enjoyed. And I just want people to pick it up and go, "Oh, that was really delicious," and not worry about what it was. Yes, you can go into the research later, but it doesn't have to be a whole thesis, you know, to enjoy a bottle of wine.
I love that. So we've covered a lot there, and I think there's a really good profile of how you describe everything from your history down to the region you're operating in, to your winemaking process and the wines themselves. Is there anything, almost in closing, that you would love to talk about that we haven't covered? If not, that's fine. But if anything else that comes to mind when you think about these two babies, as you say, that you've produced.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey in wine. You know, it's been a while for me. And there are various things, actually. You know, I have this business where we do logistics and we deal with packaging and waxing and reworks and labeling all day. And, you know, I employ probably about 10 staff members, or up between 10 and 15. And, you know, every year I think it's also important that they get to understand what's involved in making wine, you know, because they're handling it all day, but they don't really understand the whole process. So every year we try and find a farm where we pick a ton of grapes, literally ourselves. I refuse. I go and buy the cool drinks and the snacks. I've done too much.
You're the project manager. Everybody else.
Yeah, I do. I run the project, and we have an absolute great team building scenario. And we pick grapes and we make a bit of wine for home consumption. So we probably do a little bit of a cab, I think, in 2025. But that then gets shared out, and you know, they get a little bit. We have some also as gifts or whatever. So it's very different from the hub. It's more of a project, in-house project that we do for home consumption. Yeah, and then the other thing, you know, I've looked at my life in wine, and I'm so blessed to have been on this journey for so long. And interestingly enough, my daughter, who's now 21, has gone to study winemaking too. So
next generation's coming through.
Yeah, so it's in the works. And yeah, her and her boyfriend are both studying wine. They've bought out 2 of their own labels already. So it's definitely ingrained, I guess. The little projects that we did and the Garagiste movement and whatever. I think she's done more harvests than I have, because her dad had property in Burgundy, so she went over there a few times and has done obviously harvests here. And in her first year of varsity, she kicked back and said, "There's no ways I'm doing wine." And now she changed her mind.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
amazing. I love both of those stories. One is because, you know, taking your team out and starting to produce wines and getting their hands dirty in the dirt. That's really. It shows you pushing around the accessibility of the wines. Right? It's not just about the fancy bottle with a fancy label. It's getting down and getting understanding where it comes from and what the roots, proverbial roots are of the wines, which I love. The other one with your daughter, I'll just tell a little bit of story. Last Wednesday, I had the opportunity of going to a wine tasting in downtown Charleston, and one of the sort of high-end wine bars there had brought in 4 winemakers from South Africa, and you might know these names: Cristellum Wines, Gabriel's Kloof, Memento Wines, and Moya Mika Wines.
Oh yes, Habibi, they're one of our clients for consulting. Yes, indeed.
And David and Nadia Wines.
Yes.
So, my points of the story is we had a lovely evening. We tasted all these wonderful wines, but it's just so good to see the young people coming through. These were young winemakers.
Yes.
And these guys are standing up, and they're probably 20 years younger than me. I won't give away my age, but they're probably 20 years younger than me. How
do you think I feel?
And, you know, it just invigorates the story coming out of the region, because, you know, oftentimes when people think, especially if you've been away like me for a long time, you think about the old sort of legacy heritage brands, you know, the Vergelekens and the Marathis and those guys, which are still fantastic wines. But, you know, it's just seeing that youth come through, like your daughter, and really sort of taking the mantle and moving forward with it is such a good feel-good story. You know, it
really is. And the thing is, you know, for me, it's just amazing, because it makes me feel that the 3 decades I've put into wine are actually being paid forward, you know. So, and I love that. And I see the young people come in, and they've got new ideas, and they're making delicious wines, you know, and they had the opportunity which was a blessing to them to travel and do wines overseas. Where obviously when I started in wine, it was very much still sanctioned. We were sanctioned still, so it was quite different. And it's just lovely to see how it's opened up and developed into a very strong industry where there's such potential for young people to show their skills, prove themselves, and do something really special and unique. That's it's the door's wide open. So it's wonderful. Yeah.
Amazing. On that really good feel-good thought, thank you so much, Tanja, for your time. We'll be chatting the next couple of weeks about getting some of this beautiful wine over to the States again. Just thank you for your time and really enjoy the rest of it.
It's an absolute pleasure. And if there are ever any questions when anyone's tasting the wines or they've got friends around and don't know how to answer, please just WhatsApp me. Hopefully it's not too late or too early, but I'd be happy to answer anything that you need to know on those two wines.
Wonderful. Finishing off on an accessibility point, that Tanja's accessible for us to be able to reach out and talk about the wines. Have a wonderful day, and thank you once again for the time.
Thanks, Warren.
Thanks, Tanja. Bye-bye.